For years, many parents have been trying to call attention to the benefits of a marijuana compound, which they say helps reduce seizures. It's known as CBD. And this morning, for the very first time, a landmark clinical trial is backing up their claims. Let's go to Tishana with the details of the study. Good morning.
Good morning, Heather. Well, the study was published in the New England Journal of Medicine, and it was a month-long American study. So there were 120 young patients between the ages of 2.5 and 18 years old, and these are patients that suffered from Dravet syndrome. And this is a rare form of epilepsy, which often is resistant to the medications that are available. Now, half of these young people were assigned to cannabidiol, or CBD, as it's commonly known. And this is a compound form of marijuana, and it comes in an oil form. And the remaining group were given placebo. So let's take a look at the numbers. Here is what this study found. It found for the group treated with CBD, their seizures dropped 39% on average. And for 5%, which was about 3 kids, they reported that their seizures stopped entirely. Now, in the placebo group, they saw seizures drop 13%. So some pretty interesting figures there. And there were some patients that had to drop out of the study due to some of the side effects they experienced, so such as drowsiness or nausea. But many of these kids were also taking other medications. So experts are saying that this is a very positive sign and really backs up the claims that many parents have been making for years.
Some other parents have concerns, Tishana. Will it make the children high? Medicinal marijuana, some questions, still some stigma. What are experts saying now?
Well, the biggest reason there was a lot of stigma was because there wasn't any medical evidence to back up these claims. So we were hearing anecdotes from parents. But one of the things that medical experts are urging is that people need to know that this does not make kids high, because this is actually the compound from marijuana. So here's our Dr. Lynn explaining a bit more about how this drug works.
When you look at a marijuana plant, it has a lot of different chemicals in it. We've all heard about THC, so that's the one that makes you high. In the medical world, we call it psychoactive, so it goes into your head, makes you feel all those high feelings. So there's lots of that in marijuana plant as well, but the CBD doesn't make you high. So therefore it
doesn't make you high. That's
exactly,
important
and that's
for parents.
important, right? In the past, we've heard about people using this sort of way back 1,800 years ago. They were using marijuana for seizures as well, but then unfortunately they got everything. So therefore they got the high as well as the medicine part of it. So now what they've been able to do is separate the two. So you now have CBD, in terms of this one, it's almost 98% pure. So there's very few other chemicals in there, which means you don't get the high. And now you could study it just like a medication in terms of this. And that's why it's interesting, because we can separate out the two. So that way we're not giving the components that make kids high. What we're doing is giving them the medicinal part.
The medical implications of this. So as you look at this study, and it was interesting, a significant number of patients, but it was a study where neither the researchers nor the patients knew who was getting the CBD and who was getting the placebo. So it was really totally blind, wasn't it?
Yeah. So before we would just have anecdotes, parents saying that, we snuck across to this province or this state and we got this stuff and it worked. And we just thought, well, we can't really trust that kind of evidence. So what they did this time is they said, okay, we're going to bring kids in that have this particular very resistant type of seizures. And what we're going to do is split them up. So in other words, one group actually gets the active treatment, the other group gets a placebo, but they don't know. So the parents don't know, the kids don't know, the doctors don't even know. So therefore there's no bias. And then what they did was follow them for about 14 weeks. And they even dosed it based on weight. Right? You have a big child or a little child, we need to get the right dosing. And so they adjusted it for weight. So they did everything properly. And what they found is that the group that was getting the active treatment, their seizure rates went from about 12 per month down to about 6 per month. Okay, so quite a big drop. And some of these kids are having 4 seizures a month. Some of them were having 1,700 seizures a month. So you can imagine if you get a reduction in that, it's very dramatic.
It is, absolutely.
Now, not everybody got benefit. Okay?
No, I mean, this is not a panacea. I mean, the study says there were some negatives.
Not everybody got benefits. About 5% of the people, as you said, actually had a cure, but the majority of people had some form of benefit. Not everybody had benefit, just like normal medications. And similarly, just like normal medications, there were side effects. So in other words, some kids had vomiting, nausea, some felt sleepy and things like that. But basically what we're doing is we're now studying it like a proper medication. So we know what the benefits are. We now know what the side effects are as well.
So it's a little bit of vindication for the parents who've been saying this loudly loudly for some time, obviously crying out for further research. We should probably, is there a caveat in all of this? It was funded by a pharmaceutical company, which also designed the trial, helped run it, and one of the doctors involved has some patents related, but it is published in the New England Journal of Medicine without any caveats attached. So it does seem to be statistically solid anyway.
Yeah, and it's because of that design. That's why we're talking about it, and that's why the New England Journal picked it up. So even though it's a company-related kind of study, it's still valid. And I think what this is going to do is head in this direction. So there are other studies that are registered right now, ongoing, on other kids that have different diseases that make them treatment resistant as well. And this all came because when they look back at kids that got this, the ones that have these types of conditions did very well. And so that's why they picked on these kids to study them further. So you could see that this might expand outward to other people that have seizures that maybe are resistant to our normal medication. So you can see them doing more studies in a more scientific way.
Because, I mean, there still is stigma associated because of the hallucinogenic component, the THC, to marijuana. But maybe this just indicates there's much more in terms of medical benefit that we may learn, that we can derive from this plant.
By separating out the two, I think that makes it easier for doctors to say, you know what, I believe in this part. Just like we take a lot of things from nature. You know, Taxol is a cancer medication that we take from the bark of the Yule tree, for example. So we have done that. But the difference is that we purified it. And that's the same thing here, is we're separating the two components and saying this is the part that we're looking at. And that'll make it easier for all of us.
Now, CBD treatment isn't available in Canada, but experts and researchers say that they still want to continue to do more research on the side effects aspect of this drug.
Tashana, thank you very much. So, the science, very positive coming out of that study. The findings, though, likely not to be a surprise to the woman I'm going to introduce you next. Alana Boyd has a son who has been using CBD. We're going to hear about not the numbers and what's in a study, but the real-life impact of CBD. And Alana is in London, Ontario with me now live. Alana, good morning to you.
Morning.
Your son, Carson, has something that I'd never heard of before, Angelman syndrome. Can you tell me a little bit about that and how it affects Carson?
So he suffers from life-threatening seizures. He's completely nonverbal. They did say that he would never walk, but he did learn to walk when he was 3. And we have recently just started the CBD. Okay, so before you get to CBD, so for this, which obviously how many seizures would he have in a day typically? 10 to 20 probably. A day? A day. And in the early years of his life, you would have been looking for help from medication. Tell me about trying different medications and the effects they had. So he has really bad side effects to majority of medications he tries. We have trialed probably at least 8 medications. He was on 5 at one point, and he just has every side effect that comes with it. The aggression, the sleep issues, troubles eating. He's already very underweight to begin with, so he had difficulty with that. Pretty much all the side effects that come with it. So they weren't an option. And were they helping with the seizures at all? Yes and no. Usually if he was on like 3 or 4 at a time, they would control seizures, but again, with all the side effects. So what led you to CBD? I'd heard about it in the Angelman community, and I heard that there was really good feedback from it. So you thought, why not? And understandably. So tell me about your experience using CBD for Carson. So we started back in September, and within a month we had seen significant decreases in his seizures. We used to be in the hospital probably once to 4 times a week with his seizures, a couple times ending us in the ICU. Since he started the CBD, we haven't been in the hospital at all. Not once in the hospital since September. How do you give it to him? How does he take it? It's an oil, so we put it in his food. Okay. So in terms of no hospital visits, what about in terms of number of seizures? He was having 10 to 20 a day. What about now? No, I think we've had two big seizures within the 8 months, and those were only because he was sick. So you're a believer, obviously. It's made a big difference definitely. in your family's life, in your son's life. What do you think now of the study that's actually giving some scientific heft to the kinds of things that you're experiencing at home? I think it's going to be a good thing.
In what way? I mean, in what way? It might let parents learn more about the benefits that are out there. What impact do you think it'll have?
Obviously, we'll stop seizures. I think it will have other good impacts with other things it will help.
Well, may it help others as it has helped yours. Alana, thank you very much for sharing your story at home with Carson. Wish you all the best as a family.
Thank you.
Dealing with this, and may there be ongoing relief. That's pretty extraordinary. 10 to 20 seizures to hardly any, and no hospital visits.